Welcome to our live walkthrough of the new FAFSA for fall 2022 to spring 2023. This is a new website, so if you've already filled out a FAFSA for student in the past and you're coming back this year after October 1st of this year, 2021, it's going to look different. It's a new look. It is a new website. You must actually punch in studentaid.gov, no longer use fafsa.ed.gov. It's all in one place now, and if you go to apply for aid and click right here, you can select complete the FAFSA form. In our presentations, we encourage both parents and students to get their FSA IDs and passwords ahead of time before first attempting to try to fill out a FAFSA form. And you can either click start here or log in. It actually takes you to the same spot. The easiest way for a parent to fill out the form is to select I am the student. That is the easiest way. However, today I'm going to do it from the parent perspective. We're using fictitious student data to demonstrate a live FAFSA for you today and answer the typical common pitfalls when it comes to the FAFSA, what happens, what to look out for. It's really pretty simple. You should be able to complete it in 30 minutes. Here we're going to add the student's name, and it is a test student, so we're just going to make up a date of birth and a social security number. And we're going to hit continue. And it does look different than last year, so I would tell you that. We're going to say yes, we accept. And then we get to select which year. So really you wouldn't need 21, 22 unless you were completing a FAFSA for a student that transferred to a new school for spring 2022 or is starting in 2022. If you haven't created your FSA IDs and passwords, you could also go over here and create them. For today's demonstrative purposes, I'm just going to hit 2022. Each time you do log in, they will make you create a save key. And I would suggest you get a file for financial aid and write these passwords down and FSA IDs and passwords as well, because that's the most frustrating thing about FAFSA is retaining this information. So over here, before you get started, it will give you some information about completing the FAFSA. You can go through it, but I think the most helpful section here would be what type of document should I have in front of me? And really, you should have your federal taxes, your 1040s and W-2s for the parent and the student that you're completing the FAFSA for, bank records and investments, so you know what your savings balance is and what your investment balance might be, and have your FSA IDs and passwords ready. So once you have that gathered, you can just move on. And you can see here for our student, you can put in the middle initial if you'd like, and then you keep going. You do need to add emails. However, be aware that they will be communicating mostly with the student's email. So you may want to put mom or dad's email in here, whoever's in charge of that, because there's important information being communicated here and you do not want to miss it. Students aren't that great about checking their email. So we will put a fictitious address here, and you would be filling out your address. Put your state in here, zip code, and move on. You can see at the top right here, section 2, 3, and 4, it tells you what you'll be answering in those sections as well. So have you lived in the state that you've lived in for more than 5 years? The answer is yes. And are you a US citizen or not? So you'll answer those questions and move on. What will your high school completion status be when you start in fall 2022? And for this student, we're going to pretend like it's a traditional student. So they'll have had their high school diploma. Always look up here on the left to make sure you understand who they're asking the questions about. It does get a little confusing. What type of degree or certificate will they be pursuing? So we're pretending that this is a high school senior entering a 4-year program. Will you have your first baccalaureate? No. And it pre-selected that for me. That's called skip logic. So that will happen. What will your college grade level be when you get there? Never attended, first year. Are you interested in being considered for work study? I would encourage you to say yes. If you are eligible, it will show up on your financial aid award letters and you can accept it or decline it. You are not obligated to it, but it will give you that option. So over here, if you are a male student, let's say you are male, it will ask you if you're registered with Selective Service. And if you say no, it'll say, do you want us to register you? Okay. I would encourage you to do that because it can cause problems with financial aid. Here you would enter the student's license number if they have it. And then you would start to answer questions about their dependency. So, are you a foster youth or were you in the foster system at any time? It will ask about the highest level of school completed by your biological parents. So I'm just going to answer this for this student. And then here you're going to add your high school. So it's easiest to just put the state in and then search by a portion of the high school name. Same thing with when you're searching for colleges. This database is not that fantastic, and the names of the high schools as well as the colleges are not always the common ones that we think of. So I just put a partial name in there and select the high school. And yes, it's correct. So we'll keep moving on. Now we need to add some colleges. So here, once again, I'm going to pick the state first. And I'm going to pick the state university, but I do know that it's hard to find. So if I put in University of Massachusetts, I might get a whole list of schools or not the right one. So I would just put in Amherst because I know there's only 2 colleges in the state of Massachusetts with that in their title. And I select University of Massachusetts at Amherst for my student. Now I'm going to add another school that they're applying to. And let's say it's in New York. And now let's say Fordham. We're going to search for them. I just put Fordham in there and it brings up the school. Let's say they're also applying to Boston University, just to give you some demonstrative purposes of what can happen when you just search certain schools. And let's say Boston. I'm just going to put Boston in there. Lots of schools with the name Boston. So I just wanted to show that to you so that you could understand that. We're going to select BU and move on. So that's all for our student. We have the state university at the top. There have been many, many articles in Forbes and other prestigious magazines talking about the order of the colleges. You can move them around here by selecting the arrows. But what we will do is leave the state university at the top because in our state, Massachusetts, and many states, they want you to have your state university at the top. That will be the school that they send the state grant or scholarship money to, unless you tell them otherwise. So you then select the housing plan. I like to select on-campus housing. If it changes, you can notify the college's financial aid office and they'll adjust the award based on that, or they could. And then we're going to say, gee, what is the status of the student's parents, right? Marital status, right? Our student's marital status is single. See right here, look up there and make sure you know who you're answering that for, because it does get confusing. Does the student have dependents? So that would mean children. The answer is no, or someone else that is dependent upon them, like a spouse or an elderly parent or something of that nature. Here, they're also going to determine, these are the dependency questions. So are you currently serving active military duty? Are you a veteran? Anytime since you turned the age 13, were your parents deceased, or were you in foster care or a ward of the state? So if any of these questions pertain to your student, then you would select it. But I'm going to say none of them pertain to the student that I'm doing the FAFSA for today. It will then go on to ask you if you're at risk of being homeless. And the answer is no for this student. Now it will give you the option to provide parent information, or if you're unable to provide it. So we do hear from a lot of families that say, oh, my student pays for everything, they're independent. Well, for financial aid terms, most colleges will not approve that. So I would encourage you to put the parent information in, and then you could appeal it through financial aid if you really felt you had a case, and they would make their professional judgment and decide if they would allow you to do that. Okay. And now you need to, and this is new for parents that have done a FAFSA before, this section is new. So you have to say, my parents live together, my parents are divorced, my parents are divorced, but I live with them equally, or I was legally adopted. So I'm going to say my parents are divorced for this one. Okay. And as of today, what is the marital status? We're going to say divorced. Okay. And when did they get divorced? Here we go. And which parent will you provide information for? Let's say mom. And we're going to put mom's social security number in here, and which is fictitious, and last name, first initial, which is kind of odd. You don't put the name in there any longer. Okay. And then we're going to put date of birth and okay, mother's email address. So you could have it, your other email address in here, like one of the parents' email addresses. I highly recommend not using the student's email address in here. Once again, this is important information. Has your mother lived in the state for 5 years or more? The answer is yes. In Massachusetts, that's important because they're trying to decide if you qualify for in-state tuition. How many other dependent children does your mother have? So many times you can look on the 1040 and see what the exemptions are, the students that are listed on there, but that doesn't mean in divorce cases, many times you're alternating your claiming your children. And just because your children are not listed on your 1040 for that year doesn't mean you're not financially supporting them. So if you have another student in the house that you care for more than half of the year, then you would put them in here, as well as any other dependents like an elderly parent or someone that you're caring for. Over here, you would say, mom already completed her taxes. You would answer what type of taxes that you filled out, the IRS 1040, and how did she file? Did she file head of household, single, married, filing jointly, things that you could even be divorced and still filing together. So I would tell you to fill it out as married, filing jointly, and then contact the financial aid office and let them know that you are actually divorced. They will ask for documentation. In this case, we're going to say that it's head of household. The mother indicated that she was divorced. You can find the filing status right at the top of the 1040, by the way. And then you would link in to the IRS data. So I'm going to skip this, but let me just show you what it looks like. So you would use the parents' username and password, the FSA ID, username and password for the parent, not for the student. Remember, I said create one for the parent and for the student. For today's purposes, I'm going to skip this, but this would bring you right out to the IRS. You would pull up your IRS data and you would import it into the FAFSA, and it would pre-populate all the data that we're going to populate right now. So adjusted gross income would already say transferred, and you wouldn't even be able to see the number. But let's just say this is what transferred in. How much did your mother earn from wages? If you do not know where to get the information, it tells you right here. So on the 1040 line 1, right? So you can put that in there. So, so over here, it's the same as the adjusted. For today's purposes, enter the amount of income tax for 2020. So it tells you what line to get this off of. It should be transferred in if you used the IRS website and transferred it in like I just showed you. And let's just say it's 2,300. So I'm going to add this in here for demonstrative purposes. And then it will start to ask you questions about your income that have not been imported. Some of this could be imported, like the opportunity grant, things of that nature. A rollover may not be imported. So what you do is you just look right here. You say, okay, this is for taxable combat pay. And to know if you have taxable combat pay, you'd have a W-2 that would have that on there. Okay, so the answer is 0 for this student. And then for this parent, and then they ask about student college grants and scholarships. You would not be reporting anything on here unless you got a 1098-T from the college that said you had taxable grants or scholarships. That's highly unusual, by the way. And then you would say, did I claim any educational credits? That would be on Schedule 3. And you would look in that line 3 and see if you have anything there. Over here, it's asking about untaxed portions of IRA distribution. So if you took a distribution from a pension or an IRA, it would be listed on your 1040 page. And you would take these lines and put the total amount here. Just note that exclude rollovers. So most of the time, if your accountant's doing your taxes and you did a rollover, it will say right on there, rollover. So do not include that if that's the case. And most people are not taking distributions. That's usually rarer. And then it will continue to ask you questions if you have a Schedule 1 to add lines 15 and 19, and you would put that number here. And then if you have tax exempt interest, once again, it tells you exactly which line. You look at the 1040, line 2A. If there's a number in there, then you just put that right in the box. It will then go on to ask you information about 2020. So did child support your mother paid because of a divorce? That's 0. Earnings from work under a cooperative education program offered by a college. Once again, you would get a 1099 or a 1098-T form that would have that listed on there. That's usually unusual. Taxable earnings from need-based employment, such as federal work study. Once again, you would get something like a W-2 or a 1099 or 1098-T that would notify you of that income. Then it's also going to ask if mom's getting child support. If you're newly divorced and you're not getting child support yet, then the answer would be 0. It's asking for the year 2020. So if you didn't get all your payments, list what you got paid. Are you getting your housing paid, such as clergy, military, things of that nature? You could put that in there. You're supposed to put that in there. And then over here, this is really the one that most people are filling out. You look at your W-2, and then what are your payments to tax deferred pensions and retirement funds. So that's what you contribute to your 401k, 403p, or some type of retirement fund that you might have with your employer. It is listed in boxes 12D through S. Do not include a box that says 12DD. That is your employer's contributions towards your health benefits. That would be a mistake. It would be actually adding income to your formula. So I would tell you not to do that. So this parent put this amount away. I looked at boxes 12D and it had 6,500 in here. So I just put that number in here. If you did receive disability benefits, veteran non-education benefits, such as disability, death pension, or dependency and indemnity compensation, you would have a statement for the year and you would put that information in here. Or if you had workers' compensation or disability benefits, once again, untaxed income, not reported, that would be placed in that box right there. And then you would say, as of today, and everyone will get a different answer. You can see here, as of today, does the total amount of your mother's current assets exceed $0? So you can see what an asset is just by clicking that button. Money in cash and savings, a business, they mean a business with over 100 employees, investment firms or other investments, such as UTMAs, UTMGs, assets you do not include, it will also restate that. So that's nice to have right there. Current values of retirement plans, you will not be reporting on the FAFSA, unlike the CSS profile. So we're going to say yes so that you can see the questions here. And let's say mom has 2,000 in her savings account and maybe the student has a 529 of $5,000. So we're going to put that under the parent asset, not under the student asset, because mom is the custodian of that account. If dad was the custodian and they were divorced, then this would not, the number would not go in here. Okay. So if you have twins or you have multiple students in at the same time, for each FAFSA, you will put only that student's amount of the 529 in there. Over here, as of today, what is the net worth of your mother's current business or investment farms? Don't include a family farm or family business with 100 or fewer full-time or full-time equivalent employees. That's a great majority of small businesses. And mom doesn't have a small business, so we're just going to put 0 and move on. For purposes of getting through this quickly, these are all the same questions for the student. So we're just going to say that the student didn't need to file. Either your student didn't make enough that made them required to file, or they didn't work. If they did work, obviously, you would put already completed and go through the same questions that we just did. But we're going to move on and look. They will still ask you if they made income, because they could have made income and still not file. And we're going to say, oh yeah, my student was able to make $1,200, but they didn't file because they weren't required to. And then it will ask the same questions it asked you. And remember, we want to look up here and remind ourselves, who are we answering these questions about? The student. So did they pay child support? No. Did they receive cooperative education? No. So you would continue to answer these questions. And over here, ask about federal work study. Once again, you would get a form from the college if they had reportable work study income. Okay. And then it would ask the same questions that we just went through with the parent, but typically students are not contributing to a 401k. They're not receiving child support, things of that nature. And then over here, the student really doesn't have much in their banking account. They have no investments and they don't have a business that we would be reporting. Now we're going to the summary so you can look at it. You can go back and edit it. Even after you file it, you can come back and make corrections. The school may ask to make corrections. I would encourage you to let them do that. And especially if you did a financial aid appeal, they might want to go in and change some of the numbers for you. It's easier to have a professional do it. You can print the page. I would print it and put it in my file. Then you hit continue, and they want you to make sure you understand everything. You'll read it and you'll hit continue. And of course, this is a test, but you would hit sign the form. You would put your FSA ID and password and sign the form. And then it would ask you about the parent, and you would do the same thing. And over here, I'm just going to hit submit without signatures because this is a fictitious FAFSA, but you would click this and hit provide student signature. And then you could click this and do the same thing for the parent. And then you would submit it. And it would go off to the colleges that you placed on the list. And then later on, if you remember, you can add up to 10 colleges on the list. Later on, if you needed to add more, you would come in and delete some of the colleges that are on there, add the new colleges, and submit that form as well. So I hope this was helpful. And all families, regardless of income, we would encourage you to file your FAFSA. Most colleges will withhold the financial aid award letter along with merit aid. If you do not, once again, it's something that we would encourage you to do. All students, regardless of income, have access to federal loans once you file this. So that's another reason. So thank you for your time and attention, and I hope this was helpful.